The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence felt heavy. Smoke still rose from broken machines and shattered walls. The ground was blackened with fire, and the air carried the smell of metal and ash. Among the ruins, a human commander walked carefully, his boots pressing against stones and dust. His eyes searched the destroyed village, looking for survivors. The war between humans and alien invaders had left many scars. And this place was one of them. As he moved past a broken tower, he heard a soft sound. It was not the cry of an animal, nor the call of a soldier. It was a sob, quiet but full of pain. The commander stopped. His hand resting on his weapon, he followed the sound. His steps slow, his senses alert, behind a fallen pillar, in the shadow of ruins. He saw her, a young alien girl, her skin pale with strange blue markings, knelt on the ground. Her head was bowed low, her thin shoulders trembling. Her clothes were torn, covered in dirt, her small hands pressed to the earth. Tears slid down her cheeks, leaving bright lines on her darkened face. She looked fragile, like she could break with the smallest touch. The human felt his heart twist. She was not an enemy. She was just a child. He stepped closer, his voice calm and steady. "There is no need to kneel," he said. The girl did not move. Her body still shaking, she pressed her forehead harder to the ground. The commander frowned, his voice stronger this time. "Rise," he told her. "You are safe now. No one will harm you." But the girl refused. Her hands gripped the dirt tightly, her tears falling faster. Her whole body shook, as if she carried a fear far older than this moment. The human felt confusion. Why would she kneel when he told her to stand? She was not his servant, not his soldier, not his prisoner. So why did she bow to him, as though she had no choice? He crouched down beside her, trying to meet her eyes, but she kept her face hidden. The human's voice softened. "I am not your master, little one. You do not need to bow." For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Then the tiny girl whispered, her voice broken and shaking, "If I rise, they will punish me." The commander froze. Her words were simple, yet heavy. Who were they? What had she suffered that even now, with enemies gone, she still believed punishment would come? He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Her skin was cold, her body tense. The girl flinched, but did not pull away. He could feel the fear living inside her, not the kind born from this one day of battle, but the deep kind carved into her heart over many years. "You are free," the human said softly. "You are not a slave here, not in my presence." Still, the girl shook her head. Her voice came again, weaker, like a whisper carried by the wind. "They made us kneel. Always. Kneel, or they would strike. I cannot rise. I cannot." The commander felt a heavy anger rise in his chest, not at the girl, but at those who had broken her spirit. He could picture cruel masters, shouting, beating, forcing children like her to bow until their knees bled. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath. This girl was not just kneeling out of respect. She was kneeling because fear was the only language she knew. He looked at her again, his eyes soft with sorrow. "You are safe with me," he promised. "I will not hurt you. I will not let anyone punish you." But still, she did not move. The commander stood slowly, giving her space. He looked over the ruins, his heart heavy with questions. Who was this girl? Why had she been left behind? And what terrible truth made her believe she could never rise? The wind blew through the broken village, carrying the smell of fire and dust. The human knew this was only the beginning. This girl carried a secret, and that secret had the power to shake him in ways the war never had. He did not know her story yet, but soon he would. And when he did, his heart would never be the same. The human commander stood in silence, watching the alien girl still kneeling in the dust, Her tears fell onto the ground like drops of glass, and every sob seemed to carry years of pain. He wanted to lift her up to tell her she was safe, but he could see her fear was deeper than words could touch. He crouched again, keeping his voice gentle. "What is your name?" he asked. For a moment, there was no answer, only trembling. Then, in a broken whisper, she replied, "Lyra." The name felt fragile, like a bird's wing ready to break. The commander nodded slowly. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I am here to help, Lyra." But she shook her head quickly, her hair falling across her face. "No one helps us," she whispered. "No one ever has." Daniel felt the weight of her words sink into him. He had seen suffering before, seen soldiers die, seen civilians cry. But this was different. This was not just fear of battle, was the fear of a life stolen, piece by piece. He sat down on the broken stones, lowering himself so he did not stand above her. "I want to understand," he said softly. "Why do you kneel, Lyra? Who told you that you must bow, even when no master is here?" Her small hands tightened against the dirt. Her eyes closed as if she was afraid of remembering. Then she began to speak, her voice slow, cracked, but steady enough to paint her story. "They came to our village when I was very small," she said. "They wore armor like black iron, their voices cold like metal." Her breath shook. But she continued, "They told us we were nothing, not people, only tools, only slaves." A sob caught her throat, but she forced herself to go on. "They taught us one lesson on the first day. If you do not kneel, you will bleed." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He could see the image in his mind and army forcing children to their knees, striking those who dared to stand. He said nothing, letting her voice flow. "They broke my father's legs because he refused to bow," Lyra whispered, her tears falling faster. "My mother begged, she begged them to stop. They made her kneel too, until her back could not rise." Her voice grew smaller, like she was fading back into the memory. "Since then, I have knelt every day, because if I rise, I hear their voices again. I see their shadows again." Daniel's hands curled into fists, his heart burning with anger. This was more than cruelty, was the destruction of a people's spirit. He looked at Lyra, who was still bent to the ground, as if even telling her story was dangerous. "You do not need to live like this anymore," he told her, his voice firm but kind. "They are gone. Their chains cannot reach you here." But Lyra only shook her head. "You do not understand," she said. "Their chains are inside me. Even if they are not here, I cannot escape them." The commander felt the truth of her words. Her body was free, but her mind was still locked in the prison of fear. This was not something that could be broken in a single moment. He knew he would need to show her a new way, not just tell her. The silence stretched between them, heavy with sorrow. Finally, Daniel stood, offering his hand. "Come," he said gently, "stand with me." Even if only for a moment. But Lyra pressed her forehead harder into the dirt, refusing. Her whisper was almost too soft to hear. "If I rise, they will see me. They will hurt me again." Daniel's heart ached. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the shadows she feared were only ghosts of memory. But he could see that to her, those ghosts were more real than the ruins around them. He lowered his hand and instead sat beside her once more. He would not force her. Instead, he would stay by her side until trust could grow, even if it took days, weeks, or longer. He would not leave her alone in her chains. As night began to fall, the commander built a small fire among the ruins. The flames flickered softly, casting light across the broken stones. Lyra sat near, still close to the ground, her knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes never left the fire, as if its warmth was the first safe thing she had seen in years. Daniel watched her quietly. He knew now why she knelt. it was not respected. Was survival, and the weight of that past still crushed her even now. But he also knew something else, that one day, somehow, he would see her rise. Not because he ordered it, but because she chose it, for now. He let the silence remain, but deep inside. A fire had started in him too, a promise that he would not let her past define her future. No matter how heavy the weight she carried, he would help her rise. The night fire burned low, its glow pushing away the cold darkness of the ruined village. Daniel sat close, his hand resting on his rifle, his eyes watching the shadows beyond the crumbled walls. Beside him, Lyra sat quietly, her arms wrapped. Around her knees, her face lit by the flickering light. She looked like a fragile shadow herself, small and tired, yet still awake. As if fear never let her sleep, Daniel broke the silence with a gentle voice. "Lyra," he said, "you don't have to be afraid anymore." The alien girl did not look at him, her eyes fixed on the fire. "They always come back," she whispered. "The ones in black armor. They always come back." Daniel shook his head firmly. "They will not touch you again," he said, his voice steady and full of promise. "As long as I live, no one will harm you." The words came out like a vow, heavy and unbreakable. But Lyra only hugged herself tighter, as if her heart could not trust such a vow so easily. He leaned forward, his eyes softening. "I know you have lived in fear for a long time," he said. "But I give you my word while you are with me. You will be safe." Finally, her eyes turned to him, wide and uncertain. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why? Why would a human care for me? I am nothing." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He saw not just a child, but an entire people, broken until they believed they had no worth. He shook his head slowly. "You are not nothing," he said. "You are alive, you are strong. And you have survived what many could not." He let his hand rest on the ground between them. "Open, but not reaching. If you believe, nothing else. Believe this, you matter." Her lips trembled, but no words came. She looked at his hand, at his steady gaze, and then back to the fire. Inside her, the weight of chains and memories pressed hard. She wanted to believe him, but fear was a heavy prison. The night grew colder, and the wind howled through the ruins. Daniel added wood to the fire and pulled off his jacket. Placing it gently over Lyra's shoulders, she flinched at the touch, but did not push it away. The warmth of the fabric, the kindness of the act, it felt strange, almost dangerous. No master had ever given comfort. No master had ever treated her as human Daniel did now. When the silence returned, Daniel spoke again, this time with steel in his voice. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "The ones who hurt you, the ones who forced you to kneel, they are cowards. They are not gods." His eyes narrowed as he looked at the fire. "And if they return, I will fight them. I will stand between them and you. That is my promise." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever promised to protect her before. No one had ever stood in front of her and said they would fight for her life. She felt tears rise again, but these tears were different, not only of fear, but of something softer, something she had almost forgotten: hope. Still, doubt clung to her heart. "You don't know them," she said quietly. "They are shadows in the night. They do not stop. They do not forgive." Daniel turned to her, his expression calm but unyielding. "Then let them come," he said. "I am not afraid of shadows." The fire cracked, sending sparks into the night for a long while. Neither spoke, but Lyra watched him in secret, her eyes studying this human who spoke like no one she had ever known. He was not just giving her words, he was giving her his strength, his courage, his protection, and slowly, a small part of her heart began to believe. Later, when sleep finally came, she lay close to the fire, wrapped in his jacket. Her body was still tense, but her breathing was slower. Calmer than before, Daniel stayed awake, his weapon ready, his eyes scanning the ruins. Every small sound, every whisper of wind, he checked carefully, not for himself, but for her. Because his promise was not just words, it was his duty now. As the first light of dawn touched the broken village, Daniel looked at Lyra's sleeping form. She looked peaceful. Though her face still carried the traces of pain, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "You will rise, Lyra. I will make sure of it, far beyond the ruins." In the forests that surrounded the valley, dark shapes moved silently. The invaders who once enslaved her kind had not vanished. Their eyes were still searching, their orders still cruel, and though Lyra did not know it yet, danger was already drawing near. Daniel's promise would be tested sooner than he imagined. But for now, as the sun rose, the first fragile seed of trust had been planted in the heart of a broken girl. And that seed, if it grew, could change both of their lives forever. The morning sun rose weakly over the ruined village. Its light touched the broken walls, the shattered metal, and the ashes left behind by war. For a moment, everything looked calm, almost peaceful, but Daniel knew better. Silence after battle was never truly silence, it was only the breath before the next storm. He stood at the edge of the ruins, scanning the tree line beyond the village. The forest stretched far and wide, shadows hiding between its tall branches. His instincts told him that something was watching, something patient, waiting behind him. Lyra stirred awake, her small form still wrapped in his jacket. Her eyes blinked open slowly. Red from tears and restless dreams, she saw Daniel standing guard, his back straight, his weapon ready for the first time. She wondered if his promise had been real. He looked like a man who would keep it. "Why are you awake so early?" she asked softly, her voice still heavy with sleep. Daniel glanced back and gave a faint smile. "Because danger doesn't sleep," he said simply. Lyra hugged the jacket tighter around her shoulders, her gaze dropping to the ground. Danger, to her, was always near, but now she noticed the way he stood between her and the world. As if even the morning sun had to pass through him before touching her. The day passed slowly. Daniel searched the ruins for supplies, water, food, anything useful. Lyra followed quietly, her steps light. Her eyes always downcast, though she no longer cried. The habit of silence clung to her like a second skin. At times, Daniel thought he heard movement in the distance. A rustle of leaves, a snapping twig, a shadow slipping between the trees. He would turn sharply, weapon ready, but when he looked, there was nothing. Only still forest, quiet and watching. By afternoon, Daniel was sure of it. They were not alone. Whoever hunted Lyra was still out there, keeping their distance, waiting for the right moment. That night, when the fire crackled again, Lyra sat close to it. Her eyes reflected the flames, but her thoughts seemed far away. Daniel sat across from her, cleaning his weapon. He spoke without looking up. "They are near," he said calmly. Lyra's eyes widened, fear rushing back into her chest. "They?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded once. "They are watching us from the trees, waiting for us to move." She pulled her knees close, her voice breaking. "I told you. They always come back." Tears threatened her eyes again. The shadows of her past had returned, not as memory, but as reality. Daniel leaned forward, his tone sharp but steady. "Look at me, Lyra." She hesitated, then slowly raised her eyes. His gaze was firm, strong, unshaken. "They may come, but this time is different," he said. "You are not alone. You will not face them kneeling in the dirt. You will face them with me standing beside you." Her breath shook. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was heavy. "They will take me," she whispered. "They always take us back." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice dropping to a vow. "Not while I draw breath." The firelight danced between them. Lyra stared at him, seeing the unshakable steel in his words for the first time. The fear inside her bent slightly. It did not vanish, but it trembled under the weight of his certainty. The night grew darker. The wind carried faint sounds, branches snapping, footsteps too heavy to be animals. Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened. He moved closer to Lyra, whispering, "If I tell you to stay low, you stay low. If I tell you to run, you run. Do you understand?" Her head shook quickly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. Daniel gave her a faint smile. "Then stay close, but do not kneel. Not ever again." Somewhere beyond the fire's glow, eyes were watching. Cold, merciless, waiting for the right moment to strike. The silent enemy was near. Lyra could feel it, her body trembling, her heart racing, but now, for the first time, she was not completely alone in her fear. Daniel stood tall, his shadow cast long by the fire. His presence was a wall between her and the darkness, and though the enemy moved closer with every hour, the girl who once believed she had no protector now had a human who would fight for her life. The night held its breath. The silent enemy circled, but the first clash had not yet begun. Suspense hung heavy in the air, and both knew that when the attack came, nothing would ever be the same again. The fire burned low, its orange glow flickering across the ruined walls. Daniel sat awake, his rifle resting across his knees, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness. Lyra sat a little distance away. Her small frame curled into itself, her face half hidden in shadow. She had not spoken for a long time, but Daniel could tell she was awake, her body too tense for sleep. The silence stretched heavy between them until finally Lyra whispered, "You don't understand. They will never stop." Her voice trembled, but carried a strange weight. Daniel turned his head toward her, his gaze steady. "What makes you so sure?" he asked softly. She looked into the fire, her eyes reflecting its light like water. Then, with slow, shaking hands, she reached for the fabric at her shoulder. Pulling aside the torn cloth of her dress, she revealed a mark burned deep into her skin. It was dark, jagged, shaped like a cruel symbol carved by fire. The skin around it was scarred, as if it had been pressed there long ago. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his chest tightening. "What is that?" he asked, his voice low but hard. Lyra lowered her head, shame filling her every breath. "It is the mark," she whispered. "The mark of the chained." Her voice grew weaker as she explained. "When they take us, they burn it into our skin, so all will know who we belong to." She touched the scar lightly, her hand trembling as if even remembering the pain hurt. "This is why they will come for me. I am theirs." Daniel felt anger burn in his blood, not at her, but at the cruelty of those who had done this. He clenched his fists, struggling to keep his voice calm. "You are not theirs," he said firmly. "No brand, no chain, no scar. Can tell me who you are?" But Lyra shook her head quickly, her tears spilling again. "You don't understand. The mark means I can never escape. Not ever." Her voice cracked with despair. "They will search until they find me, and when they do, they will drag me back, and I will kneel until I die." Her words stabbed deep into Daniel's heart. This was the truth she carried, the reason she bowed, the reason she wept when told to rise. It was not just fear, but the belief that her very skin had already chosen her fate. Daniel crouched beside her, his voice softer now. "Lyra, look at me." She raised her tearful eyes slowly. Reluctantly, he met her gaze with unshakable strength. "You are not property. You are not theirs. You are alive, you are free, and I will never let them take you again." But she pulled away, her shoulders trembling. "You can't fight them. No one can fight them," she whispered. Daniel studied her, realizing that her chains were not only carved into her skin, but buried in her soul. If he wanted to save her, he had to fight more than an enemy's. He had to fight the belief that she was nothing but a slave. He reached out carefully, his hand hovering near her scar. "Does it hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not anymore," she whispered. "The pain is gone." "But the shame never leaves." Daniel's voice grew firm, almost sharp. "You should never feel shame for surviving." He said, "They wanted you to break, but you are still here. That makes you stronger than them." Lyra stared at him, surprised by the fire in his words. No one had ever spoken of her survival as strength. The night air grew colder. The silence outside, broken only by distant cracks of branches. Daniel knew the silent enemy was drawing closer. Following the trail, he kept his voice steady as he added, "The mark is not who you are. The only chains that can hold you now are the ones inside your heart. Break them, and they can never own you again." Lyra's lips trembled, her tears spilling freely. "I want to believe you," she whispered. Daniel gave a small, firm nod. "Then start by standing when I tell you." He said softly, "Not because they demand it, not because fear commands you, but because you choose it." The fire crackled, sparks rising into the night sky. Lyra lowered her head again, her hands pressing against the ground. She wanted to rise, but her body would not obey. The chains of memory held her down still. Daniel did not push further. Instead, he wrapped his jacket tighter around her and whispered, "Then when the time comes, when you are ready, you will rise far beyond the ruins." In the black forest, a horn echoed faintly. Lyra's eyes widened in terror, recognizing the sound. "They are here," she whispered, her body shaking. Daniel stood slowly, his rifle in hand, his jaw set like iron. "Then let them come," he said. "They will not take you not while I stand." The truth of the chains had been revealed. But the battle to break them had only just begun. The sound of the horn echoed through the night like a blade cutting the silence. Lyra froze, her body trembling so hard that her hands shook against the dirt, her wide eyes filled with terror. And the old chains in her heart pulled her down again. "They found me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They always find me." Daniel stood tall beside her, rifle in his hands, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with determination. The fire's glow lit his face, showing no fear, only resolve. "They will not take you," he said firmly. His words were heavy with steel. But Lyra's heart still raced with panic. From the tree line, shadows began to move. Figures clad in black armor stepped forward, their boots crushing leaves and branches beneath them. Their helmets glowed faintly with red lights, their voices cold and harsh as they spoke in their cruel tongue. Lyra understood their words, and each one made her shrink smaller. "They call me property," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "They call me theirs." Daniel raised his rifle and fired into the night. The crack of the gunshot rang through the ruins, shattering the heavy silence. One of the armored soldiers fell, sparks bursting from his chest plate. The others scattered, taking cover there, weapons glowing with alien energy. The battle had begun. Daniel moved with skill, each shot controlled, his body a shield between Lyra and the enemy. But the armored figures were many, and their weapons hissed with deadly light. Bolts of fire struck the walls, blasting stone into dust. The ruins shook with their assault, and smoke filled the air once again. Lyra crouched low, covering her ears, her body pressed against the dirt. Every instinct in her screamed one word: kneel, kneel, kneel. Her whole life she had survived by bowing, by making herself small. But now Daniel's voice thundered above the chaos, cutting through the storm. "Do not kneel, Lyra. Look at me." She raised her head slowly, tears in her eyes, and saw him. Daniel stood in the open, taking fire, bleeding from a cut on his arm, but refusing to step back. He fought with a roar in his voice, his stance unyielding, and in that moment, something struck her heart. He was not just fighting the enemy, he was fighting her chains too. Another blast shook the ruins, and Daniel stumbled, falling to one knee. The sight tore a cry from Lyra's throat. "Daniel!" She screamed, her voice filled with fear. He pushed himself back up, blood staining his sleeve. "I told you," he shouted over the gunfire. "I will not let them take you. But I cannot do this alone." Her chest heaved, her tears falling. Like rain, she wanted to rise, but the weight of years pressed down on her shoulders. Memories of whips, of screams, of burning pain filled her mind. Her body trembled, halfway between kneeling and standing. "Rise, Lyra." Daniel's voice cut through again, desperate, commanding, full of fire. "Stand, not for me, but for yourself." Something inside her broke, not in weakness, but in defiance. The chains of fear rattled, cracked, and for the first time, she forced her legs to straighten. Her body shook violently, but she rose from the dirt, standing tall in the firelight. The armored soldiers noticed, their red eyes turning toward her. She felt their gaze like knives on her skin, but she did not bow. Her voice came out hoarse, but strong. "I am not yours," she shouted, her words carrying across the ruins. "I will never kneel again." Daniel's heart surged with pride as he saw her standing. Her small form beside him was fragile, but it burned brighter than the fire itself. The soldiers hesitated, confused at her defiance. Daniel seized the moment, firing shot after shot. Driving them back, Lyra's voice echoed again, stronger this time. "You cannot chain me. Not anymore." The battle raged around them, fire and smoke filling the night. Daniel fought with renewed strength, as if her rising had given him new power. And Lyra, though unarmed, no longer hid. She stood tall, no longer the girl who bowed in fear, but the girl who had chosen to rise. At last, the enemy retreated into the shadows. Dragging their fallen with them, the horns sounded again, this time farther away. The silent enemy had been beaten back, for now, breathing hard, Daniel lowered his weapon, sweat and blood marking his face. Beside him, Lyra stood trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. But these were not only tears of fear, they were tears of freedom. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice low and proud. "You rose," he said. Lyra's lips trembled into the faintest smile. For the first time, she whispered, "I rose for me." The ruins were quiet again, but everything had changed. The battle had scarred the ground. Yet it had freed her spirit, and though danger still lingered, in the shadows, the girl who once lived on her knees had taken her first step into a life unchained. The ruins were quiet again. Only the crackling of the dying fire and the faint hiss of smoke broke the silence. The enemy had gone, their shadows retreating back into the forest, but the ground still carried the marks of battle-scorched stone. Shattered metal and blood, Daniel stood tall, though his body ached. Blood ran down his arm where the blast had cut him, and his chest rose and fell heavily. But his eyes, sharp and steady, looked not at his wounds, but at the girl beside him. Lyra stood, trembling but upright, her thin frame straight against the night. Tears streamed down her face, yet her knees did not bend. For the first time in her life, she had faced the ones who chained her hand. She had not bowed. The chains inside her heart had cracked, and in their place burned something new. Defiance. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, strong and steady. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You stood." Lyra's lips trembled, her tears falling faster. "I thought I couldn't," she whispered. "But you gave me strength." Daniel shook his head. "No, Lyra. The strength was always yours. You only needed to see it." She looked at him, her wide eyes full of confusion and wonder. "No one has ever said that to me before," she whispered. Daniel gave her a small, tired smile. "Then let me be the first, but not the last." The night grew calm, but Lyra's heart was still racing. Her hands shook, not from fear now, but from release. For so long she had lived under chains she believed could never be broken. And now, for the first time, she had tasted freedom. Daniel gathered what little supplies they had and began preparing to move. "The enemy will come back," he said, his tone steady. "They never accept defeat for long. We need to leave before they return in greater numbers." Lyra's head lowered, the weight of his words pressing on her. "But where can we go?" she asked softly. Daniel looked out over the horizon, where the stars shone like silver fires. "Above the dark forest, anywhere they cannot follow," he said. "And if they do, we fight again." The thought made her heart tremble. But she no longer sank into despair. She had seen him bleed and still stand. She had seen herself rise, and now a spark lived inside her that no enemy could take. As dawn painted the sky with pale gold, they left the ruins together. The broken village faded behind them, its ashes carrying old memories. But ahead lay the unknown, a path not yet chained by fear. They traveled in silence at first, the forest thick around them. Daniel walked ahead, his rifle ready. Lyra followed. Close her eyes, watching the light between the trees. For the first time, she was not only watching for enemies, she was watching the beauty of the world she had almost forgotten. Birds sang softly in the branches, and streams of light spilled through the leaves. She breathed deeply, the air cool and alive. Her voice came quietly, uncertain. "Is this what freedom feels like?" Daniel slowed and glanced back at her. "Yes," he said simply. "Freedom feels heavy at first, because it means you must choose for yourself. But soon, it will feel like the air you breathe." Lyra touched her chest, right above the mark burned into her skin. The scar was still there, dark and cruel. But for the first time, she no longer felt only shame when she looked at it. It was no longer just the mark of chains. It was also the mark of survival. That night, as they rested beneath the trees, Lyra did not kneel by the fire. She sat upright, watching the flames with calm eyes. Daniel noticed the change and smiled quietly, saying nothing. Her silence spoke louder than any words. It was the silence of strength, not fear. When sleep finally came, she dreamed not of shadows and whips, but of standing tall beneath the open sky, of walking without chains, of hearing her own voice declare she was free. Days passed, and though the road was hard, she did not kneel again. The enemy's shadows lingered, but she faced them now with Daniel beside her. And little by little, the chains inside her heart broke apart until they were nothing but dust. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the forest gold, Daniel looked at her and asked, "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" Lyra thought for a moment, her lips curving faintly. "You told me. Rise," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his eyes proud. "And you did," he said, "not because I told you to, but because you chose it." Her smile grew, faint but real. "Yes," she said softly, "I chose it." And in that moment, she knew the truth. No matter what shadows hunted her, no matter what scars she bore, she would never kneel again, because the chains were gone, and in their place was hope.